In this video, we are going to take the next step in our e-commerce application. We started this Node.js series for a e-commerce backend. So now we are going to create some APIs for that e-commerce. As we already have developed the front end for this in the Angular, in our Angular series. Now we are going to create an API for that Angular application, and then we are going to use these APIs in that Angular application. Now let's try to create the API for the Angular application in this Node.js application for different section of the e-commerce application. Hey everyone, this is Kamran and I'm a full stack web developer. And in this video series, I am teaching how you can create APIs and how you can create a full-fledged application using Express.js. In this video, I'm gonna talk about how we are going to create APIs for our e-commerce application. So if you are new here, I would suggest you to subscribe to the channel, and I would also request you to share this video with all others who wants to learn to develop APIs and applications on Express.js. So let's talk about the e-commerce backend now. So there are three main sections which we have to cover in the e-commerce. So the first section is the category, and inside that we are going to have subcategory, and in each subcategory we are going to have products. So this is the simple e-commerce for which we have already built the front end in Angular series, and now we are going to create APIs for this. And for each section we are going to create four different APIs. First API will be the get the list of the section. For example, if we want to get the list of the categories, we are going to create first API for getting the list of the categories. And similarly, we are going to create an add API as well as to update that API. And finally, we are going to create an API to delete the category. And for the subcategories and the product, we are going to apply the same. So now let's try to build the APIs. And now we already have this category folder in our routes folder, and we have already created this list API to get the list of categories in the last video. But in this API we are not actually returning the list. Instead of that, we are just simply passing the message. So I'm going to replace this with the actual list. For that, currently I'm not going to create any database because that will be a big complexity for any newcomer. So we are going to use a simple JSON object to pass the data for now, and then later on when we are going to get to the database part, we are going to cover the database part in that series. Now let's create a file instead of a database where we are going to store the data of our application. And for that, I'm going to simply create a text file where we are going to store our data. So this will be our category.txt file. So it will be a simple text file where I'm going to simply save the text of my data. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to convert my data into a simple string, and then I'm going to store in this. And whenever we have to update, we can use the same file. For getting the list, we have to read this file and just simply send this file data back in the API response. And we have already covered how we can read a file in one of our videos in the Node.js series. So you can view that to get the idea how we can read a file. And in this video, I'm just directly gonna read this text file. So by default, I'm gonna just simply add a empty array in this text file. And here when I'm going to read this file. So I will read and store the data in this data file, and I'm going to read sync this file. So for that, first I have to import our fs module. So let's import that. So const fs is equals to require fs. Now I'm going to use file system to read this file. So file dot read file sync, and I have to pass this, and I will be passing this file name over here. So category.txt. And I have to return this as a data. So instead of message, I'm going to replace this with data. And in this data, I have to pass this data. Now, as I said that I am going to store the data in the file in the form of string. So I have to parse this data before sending it. So I'm just gonna JSON parse it. As we have already discussed in one of the videos that everything we are going to send in our response and request in the API will be in the JSON format. So that is why I'm just JSON parsing this. Similarly, I'm going to create a new API through which I'm going to add a category in my application. So let's do that. So for that, I have to update this folders index.js first. So I'm just going to copy paste this. So now in this API, I have to add a new category. So for that, I'm going to use post API, and post will, and we have to name this, which will be, so you can just empty it. So the post slash will work as adding the file. So here file name I can put at add category. Even like if you want, you can remove this category as well, because we are already in this category folder. So we have to create this file. Let's create that. And in this, we are just simply going to use the same pattern. So I'm going to copy and paste this over here. And now I have to add this, right? So in this API, whenever we are going to create a new category, we have to send the category body, like let's say name or link of the image. We have to send those data from the API request, right? We are going to send that in the request body. So let's take the data from the request body. So here I'm going to create a new variable name as new category, and in this variable I'm going to take the request body, and obviously for in request body I'm going to wrap this around a variable name as category. Now this new category, I have to add this in the file category text file, right? For that, first I will get the content of this file into a variable name as file data. Now I'm going to parse this file data. So for that, I'm going to create a new variable name as data, and which will contain the parse data of this file data. Now this data is an array, so we can simply push our new category to into this. So let's push the data in this dot push the new category. And once I push this data into new category, I can simply write the file again with the updated data. So let's do that. So for that, again, I'm going to use file system. So file system dot write file sync. Here I have to pass the file name, which is category.txt, and then I have to pass the value of this, right? So I will pass the data, and just keep in mind that you just don't have to pass the JSON data. Instead of that, you can say JSON.stringify. So this will stringify the data again before pushing it to the file. And in the response, you can simply send a message, or you can simply return the new category itself. So just return this body itself. So if I get the response as a new category object, that means that the new category has been added to our data. Now let's try to test both this API of list and as well as the add category. So before that, we have to make sure that our category text file is in the main folder, because here also we are just passing the category text file, right? So either we can pass the whole path of this category text with respect to server.js, which will be routes/v1/category/category.txt, or we can simply move this category text to the outer folder. Yes, I want to move it out to the out folder. Why we are doing this? Because server.js is running in the main folder, and every path will be taken with respect to this server.js. Now it's time to test both the APIs. And to test our APIs, we are going to use the Postman service, which we have already gone through in the last video. So let's put our API over here. So which will be localhost 5000. This is the port where I'm running our application, and /category/list. So this is our list API. So let's try to hit this. And once I hit this, I get that data is empty for now. So let's try to add a new category as a post, and in this I'm going to use the same, but I will remove this category. So this will be a post, and in this we have to send the data in the body, right? So for that, go to body, and here we have to choose raw, and here also like we have to choose the data as JSON, because we are going to send a request body as a JSON, right? So for that I have chosen body, and inside this I'm just sending a JSON file. So let's create a JSON in this, and in this we have to say category, and that will be also an object, and in this object we have to pass two things: name, which will be the name of the category. So this will be clothing, and we can also pass the status. So status here means whether this category is in use or not. So by default I will keep it 1, and let's try to hit this API now. Before hitting any API, just make sure that the latest code is running in your application. So once I hit this, so here you can see in the response also I'm getting name and the status as 1. This means that clothing category has been added to our database. So to verify that, let's click on the list again. So once I click on this, you can see that in the data I have this clothing and status 1. So here in the data, we can also maintain the ID for each of the element. So we can add that. Let's add that. This will be ID and the value will be 1. And this should be unique for each of the entry. So in the project also, if you go to this character.txt, you can see that clothing has been added into this. So I will just empty it again, just to add it again with an ID. Now let's add this and see the output over here. Yeah, so here you can see the status is 1 and the ID is 1. Similarly, you can add multiple categories in this category folder. And now let's create another API to update this category. So for that, again in index.js file, I'm going to add a new API which will be a put API, and put API we usually use to update the category. And the file name we can put it as update category, or update, just an update will also work. So I'm going to create a new file name as update category.js, and I can simply copy this content to update as well. And now this update, so how this update will work? So in this update, whenever we are going to get a data, we will check the ID at the of that particular object, update the data with the upcoming data, right? For example, if I want to change this data of clothing category to fashion, so I can do that using this API. So for that, first I have to read the text file, and then I have to search that particular object and then update that object with the new content. So in this update API also, we are going to get the data in the request body. So let's get that first. Category is equals to request dot body dot category. Now let's create a new variable name as category ID, which will be category.id. I will remove this request body as I have already created a category constant. Now when I read this file data, first I will pass it. So const data is equals to json.parse, and in this I am going to pass the file data, and then I'm going to loop over this file data. So for this, I'm going to use for each loop. So let's use that, and its data will be this, into which we will have a category data, right? So category data. Data. Now I have to check if category data dot ID is equals to category ID. Means we are just searching the data in this array. So once I get that object, I will just simply update that, and here I will get index of the data as well. So I can just simply update the data of index with category data. Once I do this, the data will be updated. I have to just write the file again. So what I can do, I can simply do fs.write file sync, and I have to pass the file name again, category.txt, and the data. As I said already, that it should be a stringified value, right? Say JSON stringify. Okay, now it's time to test this out. So for that, first we have to restart our server. Let's do that. I will stop this server and start this again. And once this is start, we can test it out. So in this postman, let's try to add a new category. So for that will be ID 2 and status will be 1, and we can add electronic. We will add a spelling mistake for now, and then we are going to update this. So once I add this new category, so here you can see that we have two entries now. One is clothing and the other one is electronic. Now we will try to update this electronics object with an S. For that, let's open a new tab, and in that we will test out this update value. So for that will be localhost 5000 slash category, and this will be a put API, right? And the body will be exactly same. So I can just copy this and put this body over here. Just don't forget to make it JSON. So once I update this, I can update the name, and then I can just simply call this API. So once I hit this API, I can see the response I'm getting is the actual body of that. So that means that is the value is updated properly. Now let's check the list API, and that will make sure that we have updated the value, right? Once I hit the list API, I can see that I am getting this S in the electronics. Adding a new category, updating that category, and getting the list of that category is successfully run. And now we have to create a new API, delete the category in the list. So how actually did the delete API works? So in the delete API, we just update the status of that object from 1 to 0. So in that case, if it is an accidental delete, then we can get the data back. So that will be your homework, to create an API which will delete, which will actually update the status. And now we are going to create one more API in which we are going to get the detail of a particular category, right? So let's create that. So now you know the steps, right? So first you have to update the index.js file, where you have to create a new API, and this API will also be a get, and that will be a slash, and this will be, instead of list, we can say get category. And now I will create a new file for this, and I'm just going to copy the content of this list API over here, and here just I have to file, and in this get we are going to get the ID of the category which we want to get in the response, right? So let's get the ID from the request. So you have to keep in mind, in the post and put you will be getting the data in the request body, whereas in the get APIs you are going to get the data in the request.query. Now first let's get the category ID, right? So let's get the category ID, and we will get this into request.query.id. So here also, first we are going to parse the data, and then we are going to loop over the data and search for the category ID, right? So let's do that again using the same for each. So here we have to search for the category ID again. So if category dot ID is equals to category ID, then we have to simply respond this. So I will move this line from here to here. So once I get that category, I will just simply return, I'm going to just simply return this in the data. So let's do that, and then, and yeah, that's it. So this will return our category. So let's make sure everything is fine. So first check the index file, that we have this get category, and in the get category we are just searching for the file and returning the matching category, right? So now here I'm going to open a new tab. I'm just going to copy this one and going to paste in this, and remove this list, and going to hit get on this slash category. And before hitting this, I have to add a query as well, right? How we can do that in the API? Just append the query in the URL itself. If we see here, we have this ID, right? So we have to pass this. So we are going to pass ID is equals to, and we are going to get the ID, whatever is with the ID 1. So before testing out this API, we have to make sure that this category should be a number. So we are going to explicitly convert this into a number, as when we are going to send it in a query, it will be converted to a string. That is why we have to convert this into a number. Now let's try to hit this API and get the response. So once I hit that, we can see that we are getting the response in this. So this is how we are going to create the get list, get category, update category, and add category, and delete category is your homework. So we are going to create 5 APIs for each of the section: category, subcategory, and product for our e-commerce application. I would suggest you to keep practicing and create all the APIs for each of the section. So in the next video, we are going to take the next step in this application. And before leaving, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, I would suggest you to hit the subscribe button, as well as I would suggest you to share the video with others who are willing to learn API development as well as the web development itself. Happy coding, everyone. See you in the next video.